Have you ever felt invisible? Truly, deeply unseen? Like you're screaming into a void, and the world just passes by? Before we begin, if stories like this touch your heart, please like the video, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It means a lot to us. October in Chicago bites. Not the playful nip of autumn, but a wet, gritty chill that seeps into your bones. Like the city itself is exhaling frost. Rain slicked the alleys that night, turning pavement into a jagged mirror, reflecting neon signs and the distant wail of sirens. Anya stood at her third-floor window, pressing a feverish cheek against the cold glass. Below, dumpsters overflowed, and a stray plastic bag danced in the wind like a ghost. She'd moved here 6 months ago, chasing a fresh start after the divorce. Now, with a 4-month-old son, Leo, asleep in the next room, she felt more alone than ever. Motherhood wasn't the warm hug she'd imagined. It was 2 a.m. feedings, stained sweatshirts, and a silence so heavy, it echoed. Her ex's last words still clawed at her. "You'll drown alone with that baby, Anya." Sometimes she wondered if he was right. That's when she first saw him. A shadow moving with liquid grace. Between the dumpsters. Not a rat. Too deliberate. Too present. Anya flicked on the porch light, its weak yellow beam slicing the alley. And there he was. A cat. But not just any cat. This one looked like he'd wrestled the city and lost. Twice. His fur, what was left of it, was a patchwork of battles. Mud brown, scar white, and rust. One ear was half gone, a ragged crescent. His tail kinked sharply, like a question mark. But his eyes. God, his eyes. 2 chips of green ice. Fixed on her window. Unblinking. Assessing. Anya held her breath. Leo whimpered softly in his crib. The cat didn't flinch, just kept staring, as if he knew exactly what lay beyond that glass. She started leaving food. Not a conscious decision, really. Emptying a can of tuna onto a chipped plate one sleepless dawn, placing it by the fire escape. The next morning, it was licked clean. No cat in sight. But she felt him. A shift in the alley's energy. A silent watcher. She named him Scrapper. Fitting, she thought. Survival written in every scar. Leo's colic screams would rip through the apartment, and Anya would stumble to the window, tear-streaked and hollow. Scrapper would be there, perched on a dumpster lid, still as stone, watching, not judging, seeing her. One raw, rainy twilight, she broke, slid down the wall beside the window, sobbing into her knees. Leo finally slept, but the loneliness, it was a physical ache. When she looked up, wiping snot on her sleeve, Scrapper was closer, on the fire escape landing now, just 1 story below. Rain plastered his fur flat, revealing ribs like drumsticks. He didn't meow, didn't beg, just sat, head tilted, those green eyes, holding hers through the streaked glass. Anya whispered, voice cracked, "Rough night, huh?" Scrapper blinked, slowly, then vanished into the dripping gloom. But something tiny and fierce uncurled in Anya's chest, like the first green shoot, pushing through cracked concrete. This broken alley cat, this silent witness to her unraveling, felt like the only soul who truly understood the weight she carried. And in that damp, dim silence, the thread, thin as spider silk, began to stretch between them, across the cold Chicago air, From a weary woman's heart to a warrior who knew of staying alive. The thread between Anya and Scrapper didn't snap. It tightened silently, like a root finding purchase in stubborn earth. Chicago's November arrived, dragging a heavier gray over the city. Wind howled down the alley like a lost thing, rattling the fire escape outside Anya's window. Leo's cries still fractured the nights, but now Anya found herself glancing down, searching the shadows, hoping. She upgraded from tuna to cheap kibble, scooping it onto the chipped plate just after sunset. A ritual, one small act of control in the chaos. She'd crack the window a sliver, letting in the bite of cold air, and the city's soundtrack. Distant traffic, the slammed door, the rhythmic thump of a bass line from a passing car. Then she'd wait, not at the window like before, but sitting on the floor beside it, Leo cradled against her shoulder, his tiny breaths warm against her neck. The first time Scrapper appeared while she sat there, it felt electric. He didn't just slink out. He materialized. One moment, the space below was empty darkness. Then he was there, perched on the edge of the dumpster opposite her fire escape, a silhouette against the grimy brick wall. His head swiveled slowly, scanning the alley's length. A sentinel. Only then did he drop soundlessly to the pavement, padding towards the plate. He didn't gobble. He ate with a feral precision. Hello. Ears swiveling constantly, body coiled, ready to vanish. It kept flicking up, past the food, to the sliver of open window, to the dim shape of Anya and Leo inside. Anya held perfectly still. Leo whimpered, a small, sleepy sound. Scrapper froze mid-chew. His head snapped up, ears flattening slightly. Not in fear, Anya realized, but intense focus. Those green eyes locked onto the bundle in her arms. She stood, unblinking, for a long, stretched moment. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowered his head and resumed eating. But the tension in his shoulders, it eased, just a fraction, as if Leo's sound, that tiny human vulnerability, had been assessed and deemed non-threatening. Anya felt a lump form in her throat. It was absurd. This mangy alley cat, acknowledging her son. It felt profound, like a secret nod, in the language of survivors. The encounters became their quiet anchor. Rain or sleet, Scrapper came. Anya started talking to him. Soft murmurs through the cracked window. Not baby talk, but the weary truths of her day. Rough one today, Scrap, she'd sigh. Leo finally asleep after hours of inconsolable fussing. Felt like I was walking through glue. Scrapper would pause in his meticulous grooming, one ragged ear twitching towards her voice. He'd resume licking a scarred paw, but his tail, that kinked question mark, would give a single, slow thump against the cold metal of the fire escape landing. Thump. Acknowledgement. Solidarity. One bitterly cold afternoon, Anya risked it. She bundled Leo into his carrier, a cumbersome capsule of blankets and anxiety, and carried him down the 3 flights of narrow stairs. The alley air hit like a physical blow, sharp with decay and frozen damp. She placed the plate of kibble not on the landing, but on the bottom step of the fire escape, just inside the building's shadow. Then she retreated a few paces, heart hammering against her ribs. Stupid. Hillbolt. She held Leo's carrier tighter, the plastic cool against her palms. Scrapper didn't come at dusk. Darkness thickened. Anya's hope shriveled, replaced by a familiar ache of rejection. Just as she bent to retrieve the untouched plate, a shadow detached itself from beneath a nearby car. He moved differently, not the liquid glide of his dumpster patrols, but a low, deliberate stalk. Every muscle taut. His gaze wasn't on the food. It was fixed on her, and the carrier at her feet. He stopped several yards away, tail held stiff and low. A low rumble vibrated the air. Not quite a growl, but a warning hum. Anya froze. "It's just Leo," she whispered, voice tight. "Just the baby. See." She carefully lowered herself to sit on the cold step, pulling the carrier partly onto her lap, so the mesh window faced Scrapper. Inside, Leo stirred, letting out a soft, gurgling coo. Scrapper's ears pricked forward. The humming stopped. He took one cautious step, then another. His eyes never left the carrier. He ignored the food entirely, circling Anya and Leo at a wary distance. His nose twitched, sampling the air thick with Leo's scent. Hotter. Baby sweat. He completed one full circle, then stopped directly in front of them, just beyond arm's reach. He lowered his head slightly, stretching his neck, sniffing intently towards the mesh. Leo cooed again, a happy bubbling sound. Scrapper flinched, but didn't retreat. He looked up, meeting Anya's eyes. For a long, suspended moment, they simply looked at each other. The ragged alley cat, the exhausted woman, the unseen baby. In the cold, stinking alley, a fragile understanding passed between them. Scrapper blinked, slowly, then with a final glance at the carrier, turned, snatched a single piece of kibble, and melted back into the shadows. He hadn't eaten the meal, but he'd accepted the offering of presents. Anya felt different, lighter. Somehow, despite the bone-deep tiredness, she changed Leo, her movements less frantic. As she settled into the worn armchair to feed him, she glanced out the window. No sign of Scrapper, but she knew he was out there, watching. A strange sense of security, thin but real, settled over her. She wasn't just Anya, drowning in loneliness. She was Anya, who fed the warrior cat, whose baby had been inspected and deemed worthy of protection. The connection deepened in small, sensory ways. She learned the texture of his presence, the soft chuff sound he made when settling onto the fire escape landing after eating, the way his patchy fur looked silvered under the weak streetlight after rain, the faint, earthy scent of damp concrete and alley dust that clung to him, even through the glass. She noticed how he'd sometimes stretch after his meal, front paws extended, back arched, revealing the stark outline of ribs beneath thin fur, a vulnerability he only showed when he felt momentarily safe. She saw the scars up close now, a nick on his muzzle, a patch on his flank where fur grew in white, the jagged edge of his ear, each one a story she couldn't read, but understood in her bones. One night, rocking Leo through another bout of tears, Anya broke down. The endless fatigue, the crushing weight of responsibility, the ghost of her ex's cruel words. It all crashed over her. Sobs racked her body, silence so she wouldn't wake Leo further. Tears blurred the dimly lit room. She pressed her forehead against the cold window pane, seeking anchor, movement. Below, Scrapper was there, not eating, not patrolling, but sitting on the landing. His green eyes were fixed upward, unblinking. He wasn't looking at the window. He was looking at her, through the streaked glass, through the darkness, through her tears. He saw her, really saw her. The raw, ugly truth of her exhaustion, her fear, her grief for a life that felt lost. He didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He sat, solid, present, a silent witness to her unraveling. Anya's sobs quieted. Her breathing hitched, then slowed. She wiped her face with a trembling hand, never breaking eye contact with the cat below. Leo's cries softened into sleep sighs in her arms. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the quiet intensity of that green gaze. A gaze that held no judgment, only a fierce, unspoken understanding. "I see your fight," it seemed to say. "I know its weight." Minutes passed. The wind sighed through the alley. Finally, Scrapper stood, stretched, long and slow, then turned. But instead of leaping down into the darkness, he did something astonishing. He walked deliberately to the window, right up to the glass, where Anya's hand rested against it, palm flat, inches away. For a heartbeat, Anya thought he might rub against it. Instead, he lifted his head, and deliberately, slowly blinked. A deliberate, unmistakable gesture. Cat language. "Trust. You are not alone." Then, without a sound, he vanished over the edge of the landing. Anya stood frozen, Leo a warm weight against her chest, her palms still pressed to the cold glass, where his gaze had been. A warmth spread through her chest, not the frantic heat of tears, but a slow, deep ember of connection. This scarred creature of the alley, this silent warrior, hadn't just witnessed her pain. He'd acknowledged it, shared it, and in that shared silence, offered a comfort deeper than words. The thread wasn't just tight now. It was humming, vibrating with the quiet resonance of a bond, forged not in ease, but in the raw, beautiful struggle of simply staying alive. Together, the fragile piece, woven from shared glances and silent understanding, began to fray. December descended on Chicago like a siege engine, pummeling the city with snow that turned gray overnight, and a cold that cracked concrete. Anya's fire escape became treacherous, iced over metal groaning under the weight of winter. She shoveled a narrow path to the bottom step each morning, still leaving Scrapper's kibble, now dusted with frost. He still came, relentless, but something shifted. It started subtly. Scrapper's arrivals became erratic. He'd miss his usual dusk appearance, only to materialize deep into the frigid night. Long after Anya had given up watching, she'd wake to Leo's hungry cry, pad to the window for a bleary check, and see him there, not eating, pacing. A low, restless energy radiated from him, visible even through the glass. He'd patrol the narrow strip of shoveled path, tail rigid, ears swiveling like radar dishes, scanning the alley's choked darkness beyond the weak porch light. His green eyes, usually so fixed on her window, now darted constantly into the gloom. One midnight, Anya woke not to Leo, but to a sound, a guttural snarling hiss, ripping through the brittle silence. Scrapper. It was a sound she'd never heard from him, pure, feral fury, followed by a sharp, high-pitched chittering, like angry laughter. Something else. Her blood ran colder than the air outside. She scrambled to the window, heart hammering against her ribs. Below, in the shifting shadows cast by a distant streetlight, she saw them, trapped, a bristling, hunched silhouette, facing off against a larger, denser shape near the overflowing dumpsters. A raccoon, not some cute bandit, but a hulking urban veteran, its eyes reflecting pinpricks of malignant light. It stood its ground, hissing back, paws splayed like dirty mittens, tail puffed thick as a chimney brush. The air crackled with primal hatred. Scrapper didn't back down. He advanced a stiff-legged step, spitting another vicious snarl. The raccoon chittered again, a sound that scraped Anya's nerves. It lunged, not at Scrapper, but sideways, towards the building's foundation, towards the small, grated basement window, right below Leo's room. Scrapper moved like lightning, a blur of ragged fur and fury, intercepting the raccoon's path. Claws flashed in the dim light. A yowl, sharp, pained, split the night. Scrapper's or the raccoon's? Anya couldn't tell. They became a roiling knot of teeth and snarls and flying snow, obscured by shadow and the frantic beating of Anya's own terror. Leo started wailing, sensing his mother's panic. Anya stood paralyzed, one hand pressed to the icy glass, the other clutching her robe at her throat. She was useless, utterly useless. The fight seemed to last forever, yet was over in seconds. With a final, defiant screech, the raccoon broke free, scrambling over a snowdrift and vanishing into the deeper alley darkness. Scrapper stood panting, sides heaving. He didn't give chase, turned, limping slightly, and fixed his gaze upward, not at the raccoon's escape route, but at Anya's window. At her, he held that look for 3 ragged breaths, then turned and vanished into the shadows beneath the fire escape, leaving Anya trembling, with a crying baby in her arms, and the acrid smell of fear, clinging to the air. The next morning dawned brittle and still. Anya shoveled her path with frantic energy, eyes scanning the churned snow near the basement window. Dark stains marred the white. Blood. Her stomach clenched. She placed Scrapper's kibble, doubled the portion, her hands shaking. Hours passed. No Scrapper. Anya tried to focus on Leo, on laundry, on the crushing monotony of survival. But her eyes kept drifting to the window. The silence from the alley felt accusatory. Had she lured him into danger? That raccoon had been heading underneath them, towards the foundation, towards potential entry points a desperate animal might exploit. Had Scrapper known? Had he been standing guard, not just against the cold, but against that? Dusk came early. Gray bled into purple. Anya paced her small living room, Leo fussing in his bouncer. Please, please come. Just as despair threatened to swallow her whole, a shape coalesced on the bottom step. Scrapper. He moved stiffly. One foreleg seemed tender, barely touching the ground. A fresh, angry gash marred his shoulder, clotted fur standing in dark spikes. But he was there. He approached the plate, but didn't eat. Instead, he lifted his head and stared up at Anya's window. Not the gentle acknowledgement of before. This was different, intense, urgent. He held her gaze, then deliberately turned his head, looking pointedly down the alley, towards the direction the raccoon had fled. Back to her. Down the alley. Back to her. His message was as clear as the gash on his shoulder. The threat isn't gone. It's out there, watching, waiting. Panic, cold and slick, slithered down Anya's spine. The cozy bubble of their connection, the quiet solidarity, shattered, replaced by a chilling vulnerability. She wasn't just a lonely woman in a drafty apartment. She was a mother, with an infant, and something predatory, hungry, lurked just beyond the thin walls. Her ex's cruel words echoed with horrifying new clarity, "You'll drown alone with that baby." Was this how it happened? Not through her own failing, but through the indifferent violence of the world outside? Through a gap she hadn't known existed? She rushed to the basement door inside her apartment. A flimsy thing leading to the building's shared laundry and storage. She'd never given it much thought. But she pressed her ear against the cold wood. Silence. But was it safe silence? Or the silence of something listening back? She jammed a wooden chair under the doorknob, her breath coming in short gasps. Leo, sensing her terror, began to wail. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind rattling the windows, was the raccoon, clawing, gnawing, getting in. She sat rigid in the armchair, Leo clutched to her chest, her eyes burning holes in the darkness of the room, and the darker rectangle of the basement door. Downstairs, the thump. Real? Imagined? Her heart stopped. A low, rumbling growl. Not from the basement. From outside. Close. Right below Leo's window. Scrapper. The sound wasn't the furious snarl from the fight. It was deeper, more sustained. A continuous, vibrating warning, like the hum of high-voltage wires. This place. These humans. Anya crept to the window, peering down through a sliver in the blinds. Scrapper sat directly below Leo's window, a small, battered sentinel in the pool of weak porch light. Snow dusted his back. His injured leg was tucked close, but his head was high, ears pricked forward, gaze fixed unblinkingly down the alley. That low, dangerous growl never ceased. It was a sound that spoke of ancient instincts, the territory, and a ferocity Anya hadn't fully grasped. He wasn't just visiting. He wasn't just accepting food. He was standing guard. And the cost, the fresh wounds, the exhaustion visible even from 3 stories up, was etched into every line of his battered body. Anya sank to the floor beside the window, Leo's warm weight a counterpoint to the icy dread in her veins. The raccoon was a physical threat, but the deeper terror, the one that truly froze her, was the dawning realization of what Scrapper represented. He wasn't just a comfort. He was a shield, a warrior who had placed himself and his scars between her child and the darkness. And that shield, that fierce, broken, beautiful shield, was out there, right now, vulnerable, bleeding, facing down a menace that wanted in. The thread between them wasn't humming with quiet connection anymore. It was pulled taut, vibrating with a terrifying tension, and the silent, desperate question hanging in the frozen air. How much more can he give? And what happens when it's not enough? The alley wasn't just cold outside her window. It felt like the edge of a precipice. And Anya, holding her son, listening to the unwavering growl of a scarred alley cat, stood trembling on the brink. The growl, that low, unceasing rumble from below Leo's window, became the heartbeat of Anya's terror. 3 nights. Scrapper stood his frozen vigil. Anya watched from the shadows of her apartment, a ghost in her own home. She saw the toll, how he'd shift his weight off the injured leg, only to stumble slightly when the cold locked his joints. How the fresh gash on his shoulder, never cleaned, never tended, glistened darkly in the porch light. How the hollows beneath his eyes seemed deeper, the patchy fur duller against the relentless white. He ate little now, snatching hurried mouthfuls only when Anya braved the cold to replenish the plate, eyes never leaving the alley's ominous mouth. His focus was absolute, terrifying. And so, the siege mentality tightened like a vice. The flimsy basement door loomed larger than life. Anya barricaded it further, a heavy toolbox shoved against it, Leo's stroller wedged for good measure. Every sound from below, the ancient furnace groaning to life, pipes clanking, sent jolts of pure adrenaline through her. She slept in fits and starts. Leo's crib pulled into the center of the living room, as far from exterior walls as possible. Her world had shrunk to the rhythms of her son's breath, and the unwavering, guttural warning rising from the snow-dusted sentinel below. It wasn't just the raccoon she feared anymore. It was the sound of that growl, stopping. The attack came not from below, but from within the fragile fortress of her mind. It was the fourth night. Wind shrieked around the building corners, driving needles of snow against the windows. Leo mercifully slept deeply. Anya sat rigid on the floor beside his crib, back against the cold radiator, a blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. She'd been listening to Scrapper's growl for hours, a constant, vibrating thread tethering her to sanity. Silence. Sudden. Absolute. The absence of sound was louder than any scream. Anya's head snapped up. Her heart slammed against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. She scrambled to the window, peeling back the blind with trembling fingers. The porch light cast a feeble yellow circle on the trampled snow below Leo's window. Empty. Scrapper was gone. Only swirling snow devils danced in the space where he'd stood guard. A wave of pure, icy dread washed over her, stealing her breath. Gone. Taken. The words echoed in the sudden, suffocating quiet. She pressed her face against the glass, scanning the frantic shadows. Nothing. A sound. Not from outside. From inside. From the basement door. The distinct scrabbling, scratching, like claws, testing wood, followed by a low, wet snuffling sound. Right behind the barricade. Time fractured. Anya's body moved before her mind could catch up. She lunged across the room, not towards Leo, but towards the kitchen. Her hand closed around the cold, heavy handle of the cast iron skillet she used for pancakes. A primal weapon. She flew back to the living room, planting herself between the basement door and Leo's crib. The skillet raised high, knuckles white. The scratching intensified. The furious, frantic rhythm. Thump thump scrabble scrabble. The snuffling grew louder, hungrier. The chair wedged under the doorknob shuddered. The raccoon wasn't just testing anymore. It was trying. It knew they were there. It knew it was close. No! The word ripped from Anya's throat, raw and guttural, echoing Scrapper's own vanished snarl. It wasn't just defiance. It was a mother's war cry. The scratching paused. Silence. A heavy thud against the door. A shoulder? Bed? The chair legs scraped harshly on the linoleum. An inch. It was moving. Leo stirred in his crib, letting out a thin, frightened whimper. The sound seemed to enrage the thing behind the door. The thudding became frantic, punctuated by sharp, splintering cracks. The old wood around the lock groaned. The toolbox slid another inch. Terror, cold and paralyzing, threatened to lock Anya's muscles. Her ex's voice hissed in her ear, "Drown alone." She saw it then. Not the raccoon, but failure, helplessness. Leo in danger, because she wasn't enough. The skillet trembled in her grip. From outside, a sound tore through the wind's howl. Not a growl. A battle cry. Freaking, furious yowl that shattered glass in the soul. Scrapper. Simultaneously, the basement door exploded inward. Not fully. The toolbox and chair held. Barely. But the lock splintered, the door crashing open just enough. A wedge of darkness yawned. And in that darkness, two malevolent, reflective eyes and a snarling, tooth-filled muzzle lunged for the gap. Anya screamed, not in fear this time, in pure, incandescent rage. She swung the skillet with every ounce of strength, every sleepless night, every tear, every ounce of loneliness she'd ever carried. It connected with the doorframe, just beside the lunging head, with a deafening, metallic clang that vibrated up her arms. The raccoon recoiled with a startled screech. In that split second of recoil, a blur of matted fur and fury launched itself through the narrow gap into the apartment. Scrapper. He didn't hesitate. He didn't assess. He flew straight at the raccoon, snarling, clawing demon, a fraction of the raccoon's size, but burning with a ferocity that filled the room. He landed on its back, sinking teeth and claws into thick fur. The raccoon shrieked, twisting violently, trying to dislodge the living barbed wire attached to it. They became a whirlwind of teeth, fur, and guttural sounds of hatred, rolling across the small space, dangerously close to Leo's crib. Anya stood frozen for a heartbeat, skillet still raised, watching the nightmare unfold in her living room. The raccoon slammed Scrapper against the overturned stroller. He yelled, a sound of pure pain, but held on, claws digging deeper. His green eyes, wild and desperate, met Anya's over the raccoon's heaving shoulder. Protect him. The command was silent, blazing. It broke her paralysis. Leo was screaming now, terrified wails piercing the chaos. Distracted by Scrapper's relentless assault and the baby's cries, wrenched itself sideways towards the crib. Anya moved, not with thought, but instinct deeper than fear. She dropped the skillet. It clattered uselessly. Instead, she snatched the only thing within reach, the thick, quilted baby blanket from the back of the armchair. As the with Scrapper still clinging like a burr, lunged its snout towards the crib bars, Anya threw the blanket, not to cover, to smother. She flung it with all her strength, directly over the raccoon's head and shoulders. It worked. Blinded, the creature reared back, swiping frantically at the fabric covering its eyes. In that moment of disorientation, Scrapper struck. He wrenched himself free from the tangled blanket and fur, and launched himself, not at the raccoon's body, but at its face. His claws raked across its eyes. A high-pitched, unearthly shriek of agony tore from the raccoon. It stumbled backward, blinded, panicked, trapped in the blanket and disoriented by pain. It crashed into the partially open basement door, then scrambled, howling, back down the dark stairs from whence it came, dragging the blanket with it. Silence crashed down. Sudden, deafening, broken only by Leo's frantic sobs, and the ragged, wet gasps, coming from the center of the room. Scrapper lay on his side, panting violently. Blood, bright red and shockingly vivid, spread in a rapidly growing stain on the worn beige carpet beneath him. His flank was torn open, a deep, ugly wound glistening. One front leg was bent at a sickening angle. His breath hitched, a horrible bubbling sound. But his eyes, those fierce green chips, were fixed not on the retreating enemy, Not on his own terrible wounds, but on Leo's crib, ensuring the threat was gone, ensuring the baby was safe. Anya didn't think. She didn't feel the cold air rushing up from the open basement door. She didn't register the splintered wood, the overturned furniture, the smell of blood and wild animal. She fell to her knees beside the broken warrior. "Scrapper," she choked out, her voice thick with tears she hadn't known she was crying. Her hands hovered over him, terrified to touch, terrified not to. He was so still, so small, so broken. The fierce guardian, reduced to a shuddering heap of fur and pain. His head turned slowly, with immense effort. Those green eyes, dulled with agony but still fiercely intelligent, found hers. He blinked. Slowly. Just once. The same blink he'd given her through the rain-streaked window. Months ago. Job done. Then his gaze drifted past her, to the crib, where Leo's cries were subsiding into hiccuping whimpers. A soft sound escaped Scrapper. Not a meow, not a growl, but a faint purr. The vibration was weak, barely audible over his ragged breathing, but it was there, a rumble of profound, bone-deep satisfaction. Anya's composure shattered. Great, heaving sobs racked her body. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unchecked, splashing onto Scrapper's matted fur. She didn't try to stop them. This wasn't the despairing cry of loneliness. This was the raw, guttural release of a soul, witnessing unbearable sacrifice and unbearable love. The scarred, battered creature, this alley warrior who owed her nothing, had given everything, had poured his life out onto her cheap carpet to protect her son. Her son, the weight of it, the sheer, staggering magnitude of his loyalty, crushed her and lifted her all at once. She saw herself reflected in his pain-glazed eyes. Not the failing mother, not the lonely woman, but a protector, fierce, capable, worthy. He'd shown her who she could be, by being everything she needed him to be. And in that moment of shared devastation, of blood and tears and a baby's soft whimpers, the last wall around Anya's heart crumbled. She gently, so gently, laid her hand on his heaving side, avoiding the worst wounds, feeling the frantic flutter of his heart against her palm. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice raw but steady. "I've got you now, warrior." Weak as it was, stuttered, then deepened slightly. A surrender, a trust absolute. He'd fought the darkness for them, but it was her turn to fight for him. The battle wasn't over, but the enemy outside had fled. The real victory, the fragile, blood-soaked connection trembling in the wreckage, was just beginning. The silence after the storm wasn't peaceful. It was fragile, holding its breath. The coppery tang of blood, the sour reek of frightened animal, the damp chill rising from the open basement door. They choked the small apartment. Leo's whimpers had subsided into exhausted, hiccuping sleep. But Scrapper lay too still on the blood-darkened carpet, his breathing a shallow, wet rattle that scraped against Anya's soul. His green eyes were half-lidded, dulled with shock and pain, but still fixed, with terrifying determination, on Leo's crib. Anya moved, not the frantic lunge of the fight, but a deliberate, coldly focused surge. The mother warrior Scrapper had unleashed within her, wasn't retreating. She grabbed her phone, hands slick with his blood, fumbling the passcode twice before getting through. 911. Her voice, When she spoke, wasn't the raw scream of terror. It was low, compressed with an urgency that brooked no argument. My baby was attacked. An animal. In my apartment. My cat, he's badly hurt. Bleeding out. Now. She gave the address. Her words clipped stones dropped into the void. Then she dropped the phone, not waiting for confirmation. Kneeling beside Scrapper, she ripped the blanket from the couch, ignoring the cold air swirling up from the basement. Gently, so gently it made her hands tremble, she draped it over him, tucking it around his trembling body, avoiding the horrific gash on his flank. His fur was matted. "Hold on," she whispered, her lips brushing the ragged edge of his good ear. "Just hold on, warrior. Help is coming." His eye flickered towards her voice, a faint recognition in the depths of pain. The weak purr had stopped. Only that awful, liquid breathing remained. Anya pressed her forehead against his neck, below the torn shoulder, feeling the terrifyingly faint pulse against her skin. "Too slow. Too weak. Don't you leave me. Don't you dare leave us." The plea wasn't spoken. It vibrated through her touch, through the shared blanket, through the blood on her hands. The paramedics arrived first, drawn by the baby-attacked call. Their faces were grim masks of readiness as they burst in, scanning the wreckage, the splintered door, the overturned furniture, the blood. Their eyes locked on Leo's crib. I, still crouched over Scrapper, pointed a bloody hand. "The baby's fine. Sleeping. He saved him." She gestured down to the blanket-shrouded form. The raccoon came up from the basement. "My cat, he fought it. He's dying. Please." Confusion flickered across their faces. "A cat?" But the raw desperation in Anya's eyes. The blood. The palpable aftermath of violence. It shifted their focus. One checked Leo with efficient gentleness, confirming he was unharmed, just terrified. The other knelt beside Anya. "Ma'am, an animal attack. We need to call animal control." "No." The word ripped out. "Feral. Protective. Not for him. He's family. He needs a vet. But please, he's bleeding inside. I can feel it." Her voice broke on the last word. The paramedic, a man with tired eyes, looked from the shivering mound under the blanket, to the fierce, blood-streaked woman guarding it, to the miraculously unscathed baby. He nodded once. A quick, decisive movement. He keyed his radio, requesting immediate intercept for animal transport to emergency veterinary. Critical trauma. Probable internal injuries. This cat saved the infant. The words "save the infant" hung in the charged air. A different kind of priority clicked into place. The next hours were a blur of cold panic and desperate hope. Animal control arrived, sealing the basement entry, setting traps with grim efficiency. A police officer took a statement, his eyes widening as Anya described Scrapper's interception in the alley. His nights of growling vigil, his final, suicidal charge into her home. He looked at the small, blanket-wrapped bundle being carefully loaded into an animal control van by a surprisingly gentle officer, and shook his head, a flicker of awe in his professional demeanor. Tough little guy. Anya rode in the front of the van, Leo strapped tightly to her chest in his carrier. She refused to be separated from either of them. The city lights streaked by, cold and indifferent. She stared straight ahead, her hand resting on the metal partitions separating her from the back, where Scrapper lay, oxygen mask over his muzzle, and 4 line already snaking into his leg. The vet tech worked silently back there, her face illuminated by the van's interior lights. Concentrated. Anya watched her in the rearview mirror, hungry for any sign. A nod. A frown. Anything. The tech met her eyes in the mirror once, gave a small, tight smile. He's fighting. It was enough. For now. The emergency vet clinic was a fluorescent-lit purgatory of antiseptic smells and low, worried voices. Anya paced the tiny waiting room, Leo heavy in her arms. She'd scrubbed the blood off her hands in the restroom, but the phantom stickiness remained. The smell of it, his blood, clung to her clothes. Forms were filled, estimates given, staggering numbers that made her knees weak. She didn't hesitate. She signed everything, her signature a frantic scrawl. Do whatever it takes. The money from the divorce settlement, meant for a security deposit on a better place, it vanished in her mind, replaced by images of green eyes dimming. Worth it. Every penny. The wait was agony. Each minute stretched into an eternity. She replayed the fight in her mind, the sickening sound of impact, Scrapper's yowl of pain, the terrifying stillness afterward. Thick and choking, rose in her throat. She'd brought him into this. Her loneliness, her need, her tuna cans left on a fire escape. She'd made him care, and caring had nearly killed him. Leo stirred, nuzzling against her neck, seeking comfort. Anya held him close, inhaling his milky scent, a counterpoint to the clinic's sterility. He saved you, little man, she whispered, her voice thick. Your fierce, furry knight. Finally, the surgeon emerged, a woman with kind eyes and lines of fatigue around them. She looked at Anya holding Leo, and her expression softened. He's alive. Anya sagged against the wall, a sob escaping before she could clamp it down. Alive. It was extensive, the surgeon continued gently. The gash on his flank required significant repair. Muscle damage. We've stitched and drained it. The leg, it's fractured. Clean break. Thankfully, we've set it, pinned it. He's on strong antibiotics. Pain management. She paused. The internal bleeding, that was the biggest concern. A tear in his spleen. We had to remove it. He lost a lot of blood. We've given him a transfusion. Anya swallowed hard. Spleen? Transfusion? He sounded like a broken machine. Not her fierce alley ghost. Will he recover? The surgeon finished. It's too early to say definitively. He's stable but critical. The next 24 to 48 hours are crucial. Infection, shock. His body has been through immense trauma. He's remarkably resilient, but he's also exhausted, malnourished to begin with. His reserves are low. She looked at Anya, her gaze direct. He fought hard. In surgery. Before. For you. Anya nodded, tears streaming silently now. Can I see him? The ICU was quiet, bathed in the soft hum of machines and the low glow of monitoring screens. Scrapper lay in a clear plastic incubator cage, looking impossibly small and fragile. Wires snaked from him. Heart monitor. Oxygen. His leg was encased in a bright blue cast. His flank was shaved and bandaged, a stark white expanse against his patchy fur. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose and fell in shallow, regular breaths. The terrible wet rattle was gone, replaced by the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. A fragile, mechanical lullaby. Anya approached slowly, Leo asleep in his carrier at her feet. She pressed her palm flat against the cool plastic of the incubator. "Hey, Scrap," she whispered. His ear twitched. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Her heart clenched. He looked so vulnerable. The warrior stripped bare. The alley ghost tethered by tubes and technology. The fierce guardian who'd faced down a monster. Now dependent on human hands. The guilt surged again. But beneath it, something else bloomed. A profound, aching tenderness. A responsibility as deep as the one she felt for Leo. He'd given everything. But it was her turn. Bringing him home a week later was a military operation. The basement door was reinforced. A solid metal plate bolted over the weak point. Traps remained in the alley, silent and menacing, but untouched. The raccoon hadn't been seen. Vanished. Defeated. Scrapper's recovery space was a nest of blankets in the corner of the living room. Far from drafts, equipped with food and water bowls within easy reach of his cast. He moved like a ghost ship in a fog. Slowly, painfully, disoriented by the cone around his neck, the bulk of the cast. The fierce intelligence in his eyes was clouded by painkillers and exhaustion. Slept a lot. The motionless sleeps that scared Anya. She'd creep close, holding her breath, watching for the rise and fall of his chest. Their routines changed. Feeding Leo became intertwined with tending Scrapper. Anya would settle on the floor beside his nest, bottle-feeding Leo with one arm, using her free hand to gently offer Scrapper tiny pieces of high-calorie recovery food from her fingers. He ate slowly, laboriously, his movements stiff and careful. Sometimes, he'd just nuzzle her fingers weakly, too tired to eat. She'd sit with him then, her back against the wall, Leo drowsing against her, her hand resting lightly on Scrapper's blanket-covered side. Feeling the slow beat of his heart. The shared silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was sacred, a vigil of healing. Leo, blissfully unaware of the near catastrophe, was fascinated by the big kitty. As Scrapper grew stronger, spending more time awake, Leo would watch him from his playmat, babbling and reaching with chubby fists. One afternoon, Scrapper, awkwardly maneuvering himself to drink, stumbled slightly. Leo let out a delighted squeal. Scrapper froze. His good ear swiveled towards the sound. Not fear. Curiosity. He limped slowly, painstakingly, towards the edge of his blanket territory, stopping a foot away from Leo. He lowered himself carefully onto his good side, watching the baby with those intense green eyes. Leo could, waving a stuffed rabbit. Slowly, incredibly, Scrapper's tail, that kinked question mark, gave a single, deliberate thump against the floor. Thump. I, watching from the kitchen doorway, felt her breath catch. It wasn't the wary inspection of the alley. It wasn't the desperate protection of the fight. It was acceptance, curiosity, the beginning of something new. The warrior had entered the fortress, not just as a defender, but as part of the kingdom he'd bled to protect. The Chicago winter raged outside, but inside the small apartment, a different kind of warmth was taking root. It wasn't loud. It wasn't easy. It was the soft sound of a cat's labored breathing, the gurgle of a contented baby, the quiet click of a heating radiator. It was the smell of antiseptic ointment, baby powder, and the faint, earthy scent of a recovering alley cat. It was the sight of Scrapper, sleeping deeply now, his cast-covered leg twitching slightly in a dream, while Leo, on his playmat, chewed thoughtfully on the corner of a blanket, within the shadow of the warrior who'd given his body to guard his world. Anya looked from her son to her cat. The thread wasn't taut with terror anymore. It was woven now into the fabric of their days. Stronger, deeper, irrevocable. The alley was still out there, cold and unforgiving. But here, in this imperfect, healing space, they were building something the winter couldn't touch. Not just safety, not just survival. And the quietest, most battered member of it was finally sleeping soundly. The blue cast came off on a Thursday. Spring had crept into Chicago, softening the edges of winter's brutality. Golden poured through Anya's windows now, painting the living room floor in long, lazy rectangles. Scrapper sat regally on his favorite patch of sun-warmed hardwood, submitting to the vet's careful hands as the last of the bandages were peeled away. His fur had grown back unevenly over the healed wounds, thick and sleek in some places, still sparse and scarred in others. The vet ran practiced fingers along his flank, checking the muscle tone. Scrapper tolerated this with dignified patience, though his good ear twitched when the examination neared the worst of the scars. "Remarkable recovery," the vet murmured, scratching behind that half-missing ear in just the spot Scrapper loved. Given the extent of his injuries, the blood loss, most strays wouldn't have made it. I, perched on the edge of the couch with Leo in her lap, felt something tighten in her chest. Most strays. But Scrapper had never been most anything. Now 8 months old and insatiably curious, leaned precariously in Anya's grip, chubby hands reaching. "Kid," he announced, as he did every time Scrapper entered his line of sight. Scrapper, freed from the last of his medical constraints, turned his head slowly toward the sound. His tail, that kinked question mark, gave a single, deliberate thump against the floor. Thump. The vet smiled, packing up her supplies. "You've got quite the guardian angel here." Anya nodded, her throat suddenly too tight for words. She'd stopped thinking of Scrapper as an alley cat months ago. Stopped thinking of him as a stray. As much a part of their little family as the faded photo of her grandparents on the bookshelf, or the chipped coffee mug she'd stolen from her ex and refused to give back. After the vet left, Anya settled Leo on his playmat with a teething biscuit. Scrapper, stretching luxuriously in his newfound freedom, padded over to inspect the baby. Leo giggled, waving sticky fingers. Scrapper sniffed delicately at the offered hand, then, with a glance at Anya as if asking permission, bumped his head gently against Leo's knee. Leo shrieked with delight. Scrapper, unfazed by the volume, circled once and settled beside him, the living, breathing security blanket. Anya watched them, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. She reached for her phone, intending to capture the moment. As she lifted it, the screen lit up with a notification, an email from her landlord. Her stomach dropped. The building was being sold. New owners. Renovations. All current leases terminated effective June 1st. The words blurred. For weeks. They had 4 weeks. In a city where apartment hunting could take months. Where security deposits demanded sums she no longer had after Scrapper's vet bills. The panic was instant. Where would they go? How would she? A warm weight pressed against her ankle. Scrapper had left Leo's side and come to her. He butted his head against her leg, then sat back, fixing her with those penetrating green eyes. "I've faced worse," that look said. "So have you." Anya took a shuddering breath. Scrapper held her gaze, then deliberately turned and limped toward the bookshelf. His gait was still slightly uneven. The leg would never be perfect, but he moved with purpose. He stopped beneath the shelf where Anya kept her most important things. Leo's birth certificate, her passport, the folder of rental applications she'd been collecting just in case. He looked back at her, then up at the shelf. Deliberate. Anya frowned, moving to kneel beside him. "What is it, Scrap?" He nudged the bottom shelf with his nose, where a manila envelope had slipped partly out of sight. Anya pulled it free. Inside were half a dozen applications, and a business card she didn't recognize. Marta Vesquez, property manager, Oakwood Gardens. The memory clicked. 2 months ago, in the depths of winter, she'd met a woman at the pediatrician's office. They'd bonded over colicky babies and sleepless nights. Marta had mentioned working for a property management company, good buildings, fair prices, and pressed the card into Anya's hand. "If you ever need a place," she'd said. Anya had tucked it away and forgotten. Scrapper sat back, licking a paw with an air of supreme nonchalance, as if he hadn't just unearthed a lifeline. Anya stared at him. "How did you?" But of course he didn't answer. He just blinked at her, slow and knowing, before returning to Leo's side. The Oakwood Gardens apartment was perfect. Not glamorous. The kitchen was tiny. The bathroom needed updating, but it had thick walls, new windows, and most importantly, a ground floor unit with a small, fenced patio. "For your cat," Marta said with a wink as she handed Anya the keys. Heroes deserve sunshine. Moving day was chaos. Boxes everywhere. Leo fussing in his carrier. Scrapper sequestered in the bathroom with food and water to keep him safe underfoot. Anya was unpacking the kitchen when she heard it. The strange, muffled thumping from the bathroom. She opened the door to find Scrapper pawing insistently at the bottom drawer of the vanity. "What in the world?" She pulled the drawer open. Empty. Scrapper sniffed it, then looked up at her, expectant. It took her a moment to understand. In their old apartment, that's where she'd kept his treats. Her breath caught. He wasn't just moving houses with them. He was making sure his place in their lives, his role, came too. Anya sank to the floor, suddenly overwhelmed. Scrapper abandoned the drawer and climbed into her lap, his purr a deep, steady vibration against her chest. Watching from his bouncer, gurgled happily. Sunlight streamed through the new windows, painting them all in gold. In this new space, with boxes still to unpack and 100 uncertainties ahead, Anya realized something. Scrapper had given them more than protection, more than loyalty. He'd given them a lesson in belonging, in how to stitch yourself into the fabric of a family, scars and all. That night, as she lay in her new bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the building settling, Scrapper jumped up beside her, something he'd never done before. He circled once, then curled into the curve of her waist, his body a warm, living weight against hers. Anya rested a hand on his back, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing, the ridges of old scars beneath her fingers. A raccoon chittered in the distance. Scrapper's ears twitched, but he didn't lift his head. The war was over. The watch had ended. In this safe place, with his people around him, the warrior could finally rest. The first morning in their new home dawned quiet. Not the tense, fragile quiet of the old apartment, waiting for the next crisis, but a deep, peaceful stillness. Anya woke to sunlight streaming across the unfamiliar walls, Leo babbling contentedly in his crib, and a warm weight pressed against her side. Scrapper lay stretched out beside her, his scarred flank rising and falling in steady rhythm, his nose tucked under the curve of his tail. For the first time since she'd known him, not just in the way his fur caught the morning light, but in the looseness of his muscles, the utter absence of tension in his sleeping form, the warrior was off duty. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to disturb him. Leo greeted her with a gummy smile, tiny fists waving. As she lifted him, she caught movement in the doorway. Scrapper, awake and watching, his green eyes bright with something that looked suspiciously like approval. He stretched, his once injured leg extending fully now, with only the faintest hitch in the motion. Then he padded forward and brushed against Anya's bare ankles, a silent good morning in the language of cats. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and baby cereal. Anya settled Leo in his high chair, doling out spoonfuls of oatmeal while Scrapper investigated every corner of the new space, nose twitching at unfamiliar scents. When he reached the sliding glass door leading to the small patio, he stopped. Saturday, sir. Anya knew that look. Want to check out your kingdom, warrior? She unlocked the door and slid it open. Cool spring air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant traffic. Scrapper didn't bolt outside as she'd expected. He stepped over the threshold with deliberate care, pausing on the concrete step to lift his face to the breeze. His good ears swiveled, catching the chirp of sparrows, the far-off hum of the city. Then, with the dignity of a conquering general surveying his lands, he descended the single step onto the patchy grass of their small, fenced yard. Anya watched from the doorway, Leo banging his spoon in approval. Scrapper moved differently here. Not the tense, ready for danger stalk of the alley, but an almost leisurely exploration. He sniffed the base of a struggling hydrangea bush, rubbed his cheek against the wooden fence post, dug briefly at a soft patch of earth before thinking better of it and smoothing the dirt back over with fastidious paws. This wasn't just territory to defend, it was home to claim. The months that followed were ordinary, beautifully, preciously ordinary. Anya found a rhythm in their new space. Mornings with Leo giggling as Scrapper batted at his dangling sock feet. Afternoons spent watching them both nap in sunbeams. Evenings where Scrapper would curl up beside her on the couch as she rocked Leo to sleep. The nightmares of that terrible winter faded, replaced by new routines, new joys. One evening in late summer, as Anya watered the patio plants, she noticed Scrapper sitting very still by the fence. His ears were pricked forward, his tail twitching slightly at the tip. Following his gaze, she saw it. A raccoon. Not the monstrous invader of memory, but a young one, scrawny and curious, peering through the slats of the fence from the alley beyond. Her breath caught. Instinctively, her hand flew to the sliding door handle, ready to yank it open, to intervene. But Scrapper didn't move, didn't growl, didn't puff up in threat. She simply watched, assessing. The raccoon chittered softly, nose working as it caught Scrapper's scent. For a long moment, the two survivors stared at each other through the fence. Then, with a slow blink that seemed almost deliberate, Scrapper turned away. He looked, and hurried back to the patio door where Anya stood frozen. He brushed past her legs into the safety of the house, his message clear. This is my home, my family. You are not a threat to them. Go in peace. The raccoon lingered a moment longer before shuffling off into the gathering dusk. Anya closed the door behind her, her hands unsteady. She looked down at Scrapper, who was already settling into his favorite spot on the rug, licking a paw with apparent disinterest. "Thank you," she whispered, not for defending them this time, but for knowing when defense wasn't needed, for teaching her that true strength sometimes looks like letting go. Fall came, painting the city in fiery hues. Leo took his first wobbling steps between the coffee table and Scrapper's patient, unmoving form. "Kitty," he crowed, grabbing fistfuls of Scrapper's fur for balance. Scrapper endured this with remarkable grace, only flicking an ear when the grip became too enthusiastic. I, watching from the kitchen, felt something swell in her chest, a joy so fierce it bordered on pain. That night, as she tucked Leo into bed, she noticed something new on his bookshelf. A framed photo she didn't remember placing there. It showed the three of them, Anya holding Leo on her hip, Scrapper sitting regally at their feet, taken on moving day. Scrapper's blue cast was visible in the image. His ears pricked forward, his green eyes bright with something that looked suspiciously like pride. Beneath the photo, someone, probably Marta, had written in elegant script, "Family isn't about blood. It's about who bleeds for you." Anya traced the words with one finger, her vision blurring. She hadn't realized until that moment. She'd stopped counting the months since the divorce, stopped measuring her life in befores and afters. The future wasn't something to fear anymore. It was simply what came next with her little tribe. On the first anniversary of the raccoon attack, Anya woke to an empty bed. No Scrapper warming her feet. No Leo's pre-dawn murmurs from the nursery. Panic flared, brief, instinctive, before she heard it. Giggles. From the living room. She patted down the hall to find Leo, now a sturdy toddler, sitting cross-legged on the rug. Scrapper lay belly up beside him, all four paws in the air, submitting to the indignity of having his ears gently patted by sticky fingers. Sunlight poured through the windows, gilding them both. Leo noticed her first. "Mama," he announced, pointing proudly at Scrapper. "My kitty." Scrapper rolled upright with dignity, shaking out his fur. He gave Leo a look that clearly said, "Yes, yes, you've made your point," before strolling over to Anya. He butted his head against her shin once, a greeting, then continued down the hall toward the kitchen, tail held high. "Breakfast is late," that tail seemed to say. "See to it." Anya laughed, the sound bubbling up from some deep, healed place inside her. She scooped up Leo and followed, their little procession moving through the sunlit house. Warrior, each exactly where they belonged. The alley was far behind them now, not forgotten, but folded into their story like a scar, proof of survival, of love that chose its own shape. Anya knew there would be other battles ahead, other winters, but here, in this golden moment, with the smell of coffee brewing and Leo's weight warm in her arms and Scrapper's tail twitching impatiently by his food bowl, the world felt exactly as it should be. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. And as Scrapper looked up from his bowl, fixing her with those knowing green eyes, Anya could have sworn he winked. "Told you so." Before you go, if this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of courage, love, and unexpected heroes. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been protected by an animal when you least expected it? Where in the world are you watching from? Hit the bell icon to get notified every time we post a new story, because everyone deserves to feel this kind of love. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded, family isn't about where you come from. It's about who shows up for you. Stay brave, stay kind, and always leave room in your heart for the scrappers of the world. Until next time, keep believing in second chances,